The contract arrived before dawn. No messenger, no announcement. Just a sheet of black-sealed parchment sitting on Brielle Conti's desk, which meant only one thing. Whoever sent it had bypassed every guard in the garrison. Brielle broke the seal slowly, because men who send contracts like this are rarely ordinary. She scanned the clauses: trade routes, territory rights, military passage. Perfectly written, balanced, professional, until she reached Clause 12. Her eyes paused, then narrowed. The line was short, only 8 words. No romantic attachment permitted between the parties. Brielle leaned back in her chair. Then she laughed quietly, because that was not legal language. That was a warning. Only one kind of man writes a clause like that. A man who believes love is more dangerous than war. And Brielle Conti knew something else about men like that. They usually have a reason. But Brielle was not the kind of woman easily frightened by contracts. Fear had left her years ago, the day her brother destroyed their pack's future with a single signature. The Crescent Council called it discipline. Brielle called it betrayal. Her brother had been the pride of the pack, the diplomat, the golden heir, the one the council trusted to negotiate with the Northern Alpha. The summit lasted 3 days, 3 perfect days. Wine, feasts, promises, the careful smiles powerful people use when they want you relaxed. Brielle had stood behind her brother's chair the entire time, watching, listening, learning, because daughters were not meant to interrupt negotiations. On the 4th morning, her brother signed the treaty. 2 lines, that was all it took. 2 lines that surrendered land their pack had defended for generations. Silence filled the hall when the realization spread. The council looked furious. The Northern Alpha looked satisfied. And Brielle realized something important. Weak men lose power because they want to be liked. That day she made herself a promise. She would never again stand behind a negotiation table. She would sit at it. Years later, Brielle Conti had become the most feared negotiator in the Crescent territories. Men twice her age struggled to outmaneuver her. She never missed a hidden clause, never lost leverage, never trusted charm, which was why the contract on her desk irritated her, because the sender had anticipated her. 11 clauses, perfect, balanced, impossible to challenge, except for the 12th, the strange one. Brielle dipped her pen into ink. Wind rattled the tall windows of the garrison tower. Outside, the mountains were silent. Somewhere out there was the man who wrote this contract, a man confident enough to assume she might fall in love with him. She signed anyway, because Brielle Conti had a rule about traps. If someone builds one, step inside it, then close it behind you. 2 hours later, a reply arrived. 3 words: arrival tonight, and 1 signature: Alpha Maverick Varen. Brielle stared at the name for a long time, because the stories about Maverick Varen were complicated. He'd never lost a negotiation, never broken a contract, never allowed anyone close enough to understand him. But there was one rumor diplomats whispered carefully. Every alliance he formed eventually destroyed the woman beside him, which meant the strange clause in the contract finally made sense. It wasn't there to protect him, it was there to protect Brielle. And Brielle Conti had never been very good at protecting herself.
Welcome back, everyone, and a very special welcome to every listener joining us today from the United States, Canada, across Europe, Asia, and every corner of the globe. Wherever you are in the world right now, we are so glad you're here. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing your cities, your countries, your time zones. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe so you never miss a story. And if you've been with us for a while, welcome back. Now, find somewhere comfortable, A warm chair, a quiet room, a cup of something good. Settle in. Because the story we're telling today is the kind that stays with you, and it begins right now. By sunset, the fortress was restless. Word had spread quickly. Alpha Maverick Varen was coming. Servants moved faster than usual through the stone corridors. Guards checked the gates twice. Even the council envoys stationed in the garrison had suddenly become very interested in tonight's dinner. But Brielle Conti remained in her office, calm, reading the contract again, because the contract mattered more than the man. At least, that was what she told herself. A knock came at the door, sharp, controlled. Enter. Captain Rourke stepped inside, a soldier with 20 years of service and the permanent suspicion of a man who trusted very few people. He's here. Brielle did not look up immediately. Already? Rourke nodded. He didn't bring an escort. That finally made her glance up. No escort? Just 3 riders. Brielle tapped the edge of the parchment doubtfully. Most alphas traveled like kings, armored escorts, personal guards, displays of dominance. Arriving with 3 riders was either arrogance or confidence. "Where is he now?" she asked. Rourke hesitated slightly. "In the courtyard." "And?" "He refused to come inside." That made Brielle stand. "Why?" The captain looked mildly uncomfortable. "He said he preferred to see the woman he signed the contract with before entering her fortress." Brielle almost smiled. So, that was the kind of man Maverick Varen was. Good. She preferred negotiations that began honestly. "Prepare the hall," she said, gathering the contract. "I'll meet him first." Rourke frowned. "Alone?" "Yes." The captain opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it, because everyone in the garrison knew one thing about Brielle Conti. Once she made a decision, it stayed made. The mountain air was cold when she stepped into the courtyard. Torches burned along the stone walls. 3 horses stood near the gate, and beside them, a tall figure in a dark coat. Even from a distance, Brielle understood something immediately. The rumors had not exaggerated. Maverick Varen carried power the way storms carry thunder. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. He turned when she heard her footsteps, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke, because first impressions between powerful people are rarely accidental. Brielle studied him carefully. Broad shoulders, dark hair, eyes sharp enough to measure every movement she made. But what caught her attention most was the expression on his face. Not arrogance, not charm, curiosity, as if he had expected someone different. "You're Brielle Conti," he said finally. His voice was calm, lower than she expected. "And you're earlier than your message promised," she replied. One corner of his mouth lifted slightly, testing your defenses. "And?" "They're good." Brielle crossed the remaining distance between them. Now she could see the details more clearly. A faint scar along his jaw, travel dust on his boots, and eyes that looked like they missed very little. She held up the parchment. "I read your contract." Maverick's gaze dropped briefly to the seal. "Did you?" "Yes." "And you signed it." "That surprised you." "Not surprised, interested." Brielle tilted her head slightly. "Because of Clause 12? Something flickered in his expression. Not embarrassment, recognition. "Yes," he said. "Most people ask questions about that one." "And what would you tell them?" Maverick considered her for a moment, then gave an answer that was far more honest than she expected. "That it saves time." "Time?" she asked, rather calmly. "Yes." "Because emotions complicate negotiations. And you expect me to fall in love with you?" she asked calmly. For the first time, Maverick Varen laughed. The sound was quiet, but genuine. "No." He stepped slightly closer, close enough that the torchlight caught his eyes. "I expect you to be exactly as dangerous as your reputation suggests."
She isn't reacting the way most negotiators do. Most people measure power when they meet an alpha. They calculate risk, distance, leverage. Brielle Conti doesn't. She studies me the way hunters study terrain, quietly, patiently, already looking for the trap. But that isn't what caught my attention. It's her scent. Buried under Crescent territory markers is something older, something I haven't smelled in years. Alpha blood. If I'm right, the Council didn't just hide a negotiator in this fortress. They hid a successor. And if the other packs discover that before she does, this mountain will become the center of a war.
The words should have sounded like a warning. Instead, they sounded almost like admiration. Brielle folded the contract slowly. Then perhaps we should begin negotiations inside. Maverick didn't move. Not yet. Before we do, he said, there's something I want to understand. Brielle waited. Why did you sign? It was a fair question. Many negotiators would have demanded amendments, clarifications, leverage, but Brielle had signed immediately. She met his gaze without hesitation. Because men who add strange clauses to contracts usually have secrets. Maverick watched her carefully. And I enjoy discovering secrets. For a brief moment, the mountain wind moved between them. Then Maverick Varen smiled. Not a charming smile, a dangerous one. Good, he said, because this negotiation has quite a few. And suddenly, Brielle had the strange feeling this contract might be the most dangerous agreement she had ever signed. Chapter 2. The Negotiation Dinner. The dining hall of the mountain fortress had been prepared in a hurry. Long oak tables, silver goblets, council banners hanging from the stone walls. But the tension in the room had nothing to do with decoration. Everyone present knew one thing. Alpha Maverick Varen did not travel without purpose, and if he had come to negotiate with Brielle Conti, something important was about to happen. Brielle entered the hall first, her expression calm, her posture straight, the same controlled confidence she brought to every negotiation. But she could feel the eyes of the council envoys watching her carefully, waiting, judging. Because while Brielle had earned respect as a negotiator, some of them still remembered the mistake her brother made years ago, and powerful men never forget old weaknesses. Moments later, the heavy doors opened again. Maverick Varen stepped inside. Conversation in the hall stopped immediately. Even the torches seemed quieter. It was a strange thing to watch. Powerful men were used to commanding attention, but Maverick didn't demand it. He simply walked forward, and the room adjusted around him. Brielle noticed something else, too. He wasn't studying the council members or the guards. His attention stayed on her, as if she were the only person in the hall worth measuring. Captain Rourke pulled out a chair for Brielle at the head of the table. Maverick took the seat across from her, which meant the entire negotiation would unfold directly between them, just as Brielle preferred. Wine was poured, plates were served, but no one touched the food yet, because the first words spoken at a negotiation often determine the tone of everything that follows. Maverick broke the silence. "You've built a strong fortress here." Brielle glanced around the hall. "It keeps the mountains peaceful." "And the council cooperative?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Sometimes." Several council envoys shifted uncomfortably at that answer. Maverick noticed. Of course he did. His gaze returned to Brielle. "Your reputation says you prefer honesty during negotiations." "It depends." "On what?" "On whether the other party deserves it." A brief silence followed. Then Maverick nodded once. "Fair." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "So let's begin honestly." The room seemed to grow still. Brielle folded her hands calmly. "Go on."
Maverick's voice lowered slightly. "I didn't come here for territory." Several council envoys exchanged surprised glances. Territory was always the reason alphas negotiated. Brielle's expression didn't change. "And yet your contract mentions military passage through 3 Crescent Valleys." "Correct." "Which suggests a conflict." "It does." Brielle tilted her head. "With whom?" Maverick met her gaze steadily. "With someone who hasn't declared war yet." That answer drew several quiet murmurs from the council side of the table, but Brielle ignored them because Maverick wasn't finished. "And when that war begins," he continued, "those valleys will become the most important strategic routes in the northern territories." Now the room truly went silent, because everyone present understood what he was implying. If Maverick was right, the Crescent territories would soon become the center of a much larger conflict. Brielle spoke carefully. "You're asking for access to our land before the war even starts." "Yes." "And in return?" Maverick's eyes sharpened slightly. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you want the council to survive it." The words landed like a stone in still water. Shock spread across the faces of the envoys. Captain Rourke's hand slowly moved closer to the sword at his side, but Brielle remained perfectly calm. Traditionally, threats appear later in negotiations. That wasn't a threat. What was it? Maverick didn't hesitate. A warning. The two of them held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Brielle leaned forward slightly.
"And what makes you so certain the council is in danger?" Maverick answered quietly. "Because someone inside it is planning the war." A chair scraped loudly somewhere down the table. One of the envoys had stood halfway to his feet. "That accusation is unacceptable." Brielle lifted one hand. The envoy fell silent immediately. Her eyes never left Maverick. "You're claiming the enemy is already here." "Yes." "And you expect me to believe that?" Maverick studied her carefully. "No." "Then why say it?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because you're the only person at this table who might discover if it's true." The hall fell silent again, and suddenly the strange contract on Brielle's desk earlier that morning made much more sense. This negotiation had never been about land or military passage. It had been about her. Maverick Varen had not come to the fortress to bargain with the Crescent Council. He had come to recruit Brielle Conti, and judging by the look in his eyes, he believed the war had already begun. Chapter 3. The Secret Proposal. The silence after Maverick's accusation stretched across the table like a drawn blade. Someone inside the council was planning a war. That was not the kind of claim powerful men made lightly. Brielle slowly leaned back in her chair. Her mind was already moving through possibilities. Because if Maverick was lying, he was an extraordinary actor. But if he was telling the truth, then the danger was already sitting somewhere in this room. She let her gaze drift casually along the table. Council Envoy Hulrich. Old, cautious, obsessed with tradition. Unlikely. Envoy Saren. Young, ambitious, but far too eager to impress the council elders. Then there was Lord Maverick. Silent, watching everything. Maverick had been on the council longer than Brielle was alive, which made him the most dangerous person in the room, because men who hold power that long learn how to hide their intentions. Brielle returned her attention to Maverick. "You're asking me to investigate my own council." "Yes." "And you think they'll allow that?" "I think they'll underestimate you." That answer almost made her smile, because underestimation had been Brielle Conti's greatest advantage for years. But there was still one question that mattered more than the others. Why me? Maverick didn't answer immediately.
Instead, he reached into his coat and placed a small leather folder on the table between them. The movement drew the attention of everyone in the hall. Brielle opened it slowly. Inside were several folded pages. Maps, letters, reports written in a tight, efficient hand. The first document made her eyebrows lift slightly. It was a list. Names, council members, military commanders, trade officials, and besides some of those names, a single black mark. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "People who will profit if war begins." A chill moved through the hall. Even the servants standing near the walls seemed to hold their breath. Brielle scanned the list again. 3 council envoys, 2 northern commanders, several merchants, and one name near the bottom that made her pause. Lord Maverick. Interesting. She closed the folder carefully. "You're accusing half the northern territories of conspiracy. I'm identifying patterns. And you expect me to trust your investigation?" Maverick's expression didn't change. "No." "Then why say it?" His answer came quietly. "Because your name wasn't on the list." Brielle blinked once. That was not the response she expected. Maverick leaned forward slightly. "Every powerful faction in these territories has someone quietly encouraging conflict. Power changes hands during wars. Fortunes are made. Rivals disappear." Brielle knew that already, but hearing it spoken so plainly still made the room feel colder. "And you believe the Crescent Council is involved?" "Yes." "Why?" Maverick held her gaze. "Because someone inside it tried to hire an assassin." That revelation hit the room like thunder. Captain Rourke stood instantly. Several guards moved toward the table, but Brielle raised one hand. They stopped. Her eyes remained calm. Who was the target? Maverick didn't hesitate. "You." Now even Brielle felt her pulse quicken. Not fear, calculation, because assassination attempts always meant one thing. Someone believed she was a problem. So, when was the attempt arranged? 2 weeks ago. Interesting. 2 weeks ago, Brielle publicly blocked a trade agreement proposed by Lord Maverick, a trade route that would have moved large quantities of steel toward the northern frontier, steel that could easily become weapons. Brielle slowly folded her hands. "So you're coming here to warn me?" "Yes." "That's unusually generous for an alpha who has never met me." Maverick's expression narrowed slightly. "That's not why I came." "Then why?" The answer arrived like a quiet explosion. "Because I need you alive." A murmur ran down the table. Brielle watched him carefully. "Alive for what?" Maverick leaned closer, close enough that his voice carried only to her. "For the same reason I added Clause 12. Her expression remained calm, but inside her mind sharpened. "So the clause wasn't about emotions?" "No." "Then what was it about?" For the first time that evening, Maverick hesitated. Only briefly, but Brielle noticed. Then he said something that made the entire negotiation far more dangerous. It was about survival. Before Brielle could respond, a goblet shattered loudly at the far end of the table. Everyone turned. One of the servants had dropped it. Wine spread across the stone floor. The servant bowed repeatedly, apologizing. But Brielle noticed something strange. The man wasn't looking at the broken glass. He was looking at Maverick. And when their eyes met, the servant ran. Captain Rourke shouted. Guards moved instantly. But the servant was fast. He reached the side door of the hall before anyone caught him. The door slammed open. Cold air rushed inside. Then a knife flew across the room, straight toward Brielle. Chapter 4. The Knife in the Hall. The knife cut through the air with terrifying precision. For a fraction of a second, no one moved.
Then Maverick moved first. His chair scraped violently against the stone as he surged forward, one hand slamming into the edge of the table and flipping it sideways. The blade struck the overturned oak with a sharp crack. Wood splintered, wine spilled. Council envoys shouted as goblets and plates crashed to the floor. But Maverick was already moving again. His hand closed around the knife's handle before the weapon even stopped vibrating. Silence fell across the hall. Brielle slowly rose from her chair. Her pulse had quickened, but her mind was calm. Too calm, perhaps. Assassination attempts did not frighten her anymore. They informed her. Someone wanted her removed, which meant she was standing in the way of something important. Captain Rourke stormed toward the side door where the servant had escaped. "Seal the exits," he barked. Guards rushed forward, boots pounded across the stone corridors beyond the hall. But Brielle's attention was not on the fleeing servant, it was on Maverick, because the Alpha had not returned the knife to the table. Instead, he was examining it carefully, turning the blade slightly toward the torchlight, studying the metal. "What is it?" Brielle asked quietly. Maverick did not answer immediately. He ran his thumb along the edge of the blade, then he turned it so she could see the hilt. A small symbol had been carved there, a thin crescent moon, split down the center by a jagged line. Brielle's expression narrowed slightly. That mark shouldn't be here. No, Maverick agreed, it shouldn't. Several council envoys gathered closer to the table now, their earlier confidence fading into unease. Envoy Saren frowned. That symbol belongs to the Crescent Council Guard. Yes, Brielle said calmly, and it's only issued to soldiers sworn directly to the council, which meant something very simple. This knife had not come from an outsider, it had come from within the fortress. Captain Rourke returned moments later. His expression was dark. "The servant is gone." "Gone?" Saren snapped. "You have 30 guards in this fortress." Rourke's voice stayed level. He knew the corridors too well. Brielle folded her arms slowly, which means he wasn't a servant. Maverick placed the knife on the table between them. Agreed. Envoy Halric looked pale now. This is absurd. No one within the council would... Brielle cut him off gently. Someone already did. Silence followed, because everyone in the hall understood the truth. The conspiracy Maverick had described earlier was not theoretical. It had just tried to kill her. Brielle picked up the knife again. She studied the mark more closely. Then something else caught her attention, a thin line carved near the base of the hilt. Not decorative, a groove. She turned the blade slightly and pressed her thumb against the metal. Something shifted. The hilt twisted open. Inside was a narrow, hollow chamber. Brielle tipped the blade slightly. A tiny rolled strip of parchment slid into her palm. Several people inhaled sharply. "Well," Maverick said quietly, "that's interesting." Brielle unrolled the parchment. The message was short, just 4 words, but those 4 words made the room feel colder. She knows too much. No signature, no instructions, just the message. Brielle looked up slowly. "Apparently, I've become inconvenient." Envoy Saren looked furious now. "This is outrageous. Someone is trying to frame the council."
"Perhaps," Brielle said calmly. "Or perhaps someone in the council has decided I'm a problem." Her gaze moved slowly along the table, watching reactions, measuring breathing patterns, looking for hesitation. Lord Maverick remained perfectly still, his hands folded calmly in front of him. The expression on his lined face revealed absolutely nothing, which made Brielle more suspicious of him than anyone else in the room. Maverick leaned closer to her slightly. "Your fortress is compromised." "Yes." "And your council may be involved." "Yes." "And someone already tried to remove you." Brielle glanced at him. "You're enjoying being right." His expression did not change. "I'd prefer being wrong." Captain Rourke approached again. "We've locked down the outer gates." "Good," Brielle said. "But whoever sent the assassin will already know the attempt failed." Rourke frowned. "You think they're still inside?" Brielle met his gaze calmly. I know they are." The captain didn't argue. Instead, he turned and began issuing quiet orders to the guards. The hall slowly emptied as envoys and servants were escorted out for questioning. Within minutes, only 3 people remained at the table: Brielle, Maverick, and Captain Rourke. Maverick leaned back in his chair again. "Well," he said quietly, "that escalated quickly." Brielle folded the parchment again and placed it on the table. "Yes, but it also confirmed something useful." Maverick tilted his head slightly. "What's that?" "The conspiracy is afraid." "Of you?" "Yes." "Why?" Brielle met his gaze calmly. "Because I already disrupted one of their plans." Maverick's interest sharpened. "Which plan?" "A steel shipment." 2 weeks earlier, Brielle had blocked a council trade route that would have allowed thousands of forged blades to move north. At the time, it looked like a normal trade dispute. Now, it looked very different. Maverick nodded slowly. "That would make you inconvenient." "Yes. And now they're escalating." Captain Rourke crossed his arms. "So what's the plan?" Brielle didn't hesitate. "We let them try again." Rourke stared at her. "You want to bait them?" "Yes. That's dangerous." "Of course it is." Maverick watched her carefully now. "You're planning something." "Yes." "What?" Brielle tapped the knife lightly against the table. "We pretend the assassination attempt succeeded." Rourke blinked. "That's impossible." "Not entirely." Maverick's eyes narrowed slightly. "You want them to believe you're vulnerable." "Exactly. And while they move against you, we identify everyone involved." Silence filled the hall again. Then Maverick smiled slowly, a dangerous smile. "That's bold." Brielle shrugged lightly. "I dislike unfinished negotiations." Rourke shook his head slightly. "You two are insane." Maverick stood from the table. "Probably." Then he looked down at Brielle. "But she's also correct." Rourke sighed heavily. "Fine. But if we're doing this, we do it properly." Brielle nodded. "Yes, because now the game had truly begun. And somewhere inside the fortress, the person who ordered her death was already wondering why the attack had failed, which meant they would try again. Soon. Very soon." Maverick looked down at the knife one more time, then at Brielle. "Do you know something interesting?" "What?" "The contract you signed this morning." "Yes." "How so?" Maverick's voice dropped slightly. "Because now we're both targets." And for the first time that night, Brielle realized something important. The strange clause in that contract might not have been written to prevent romance. It might have been written to prevent something far more dangerous. Trust. Chapter 5. The Trap. The fortress did not sleep that night. Word of the attack spread faster than Brielle expected. Not the full truth. Captain Rourke made sure of that. But rumors moved through the corridors like restless wolves. Someone had tried to kill the Crescent Council's chief negotiator, and the attacker had escaped. Torches burned late along the walls. Guards doubled their patrol routes. But Brielle knew something most of them did not. The assassin was the only beginning. The real enemy was still inside the fortress, watching, waiting. And now that their first attempt had failed, they would try something more desperate. Brielle stood on the upper balcony overlooking the inner courtyard. Cold mountain wind brushed against her dark hair. Below, several patrol wolves moved silently through the shadows, their massive forms slipping between torchlight and darkness. Crescent wolves, pack guardians, every one of them sworn to defend the fortress. And yet tonight, Brielle wondered something she had never questioned before. How many of them were truly loyal? "You're thinking too loudly," the voice came from behind her, deep, calm. Maverick Varen stepped onto the balcony. The torchlight caught briefly in his dark eyes. For a moment, Brielle studied him differently than she had earlier, not as a negotiator. As a wolf. Alpha power rolled off him even when he stood perfectly still. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Any wolf shifter within 100 yards would feel it. Dominance, strength, command.
You shouldn't be walking around alone, he added. Brielle raised one eyebrow. Neither should you. That's different. How? I'm harder to kill. That earned the faintest hint of a smile from her. Confident. Realistic. Maverick leaned against the stone railing beside her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Below them, a patrol wolf lifted its nose to the wind, then continued its slow circuit. Maverick's gaze followed the movement. Your pack runs tight patrols. Yes. Good discipline. They're loyal. Maverick glanced sideways at her. You sound like you're trying to convince yourself. Brielle didn't answer immediately, because the truth was uncomfortable. Until tonight, she had never doubted the fortress wolves. But now, someone had smuggled a marked council blade inside the hall, and someone hired an assassin. That meant loyalty inside the fortress was no longer certain. Maverick studied her carefully. You're wondering who betrayed you? Yes. That's a dangerous question. Why? Because the answer might be someone you trust. Brielle turned slightly toward him. Trust is a luxury negotiators rarely have. And yet you trusted the council enough to work for them. I trusted the system. Maverick's expression darkened slightly. Systems fail. Yes. And when they do, Brielle's voice stayed calm. Then people adapt. The wind shifted suddenly across the courtyard. Maverick's head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly. Brielle noticed. What is it? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes briefly, breathing in, the way wolves do when they're searching for something. Then his eyes opened again. There's a rogue scent in your courtyard. Brielle stiffened. That's impossible. Not impossible. Every wolf inside these walls is accounted for. Maverick looked down again toward the shadows below. Then someone is hiding very well. Before Brielle could respond, one of the patrol wolves below suddenly growled, low, warning. Another wolf answered, then a third. The courtyard erupted in movement. 3 massive wolves burst from the shadows near the western gate. But these wolves were different. Their fur darker, their movements sharper. Rogue wolves, not pack-sworn, not disciplined. Hunters. Damn, Brielle muttered. The patrol wolves lunged forward instantly. 6 crescent wolves against 3 rogues. The clash was brutal. Fur and claws collided under the torchlight. Growls echoed against the fortress walls. Brielle's eyes narrowed. This isn't random. No, Maverick agreed. They're testing your defenses. As if proving his point, one of the rogue wolves suddenly broke from the fight, not toward the gate, toward the tower, toward Brielle. The wolf sprinted across the courtyard with terrifying speed. Guards shouted, crossbows lifted, but the wolf leapt onto the stone stairs before anyone could fire. Brielle stepped back instinctively. Maverick moved faster. His hand caught her wrist. Stay behind me. Then something happened Brielle had only heard about before. Maverick shifted. The transformation was violent and fast, bones reshaping, muscle expanding, a deep growl tearing from his throat as the alpha wolf emerged. Within seconds, a massive black wolf stood between Brielle and the rogues charging, larger than any wolf in the courtyard, power radiating off him like a living storm. The rogue wolf skidded halfway to a halt, halfway up the stairs, because even rogues understand alpha dominance. Maverick's wolf form lowered its head slightly. One warning growl, the sound vibrated through the stone. For a moment, the rogue wolf hesitated. Then it did something surprising. It didn't attack. It ran. Back across the courtyard, leaping the wall in a blur of dark fur. The other rogues followed seconds later. The courtyard slowly fell silent again. Maverick shifted back into human form moments later, breathing steady, completely composed. Brielle stared at him. That wasn't an attack. No, that was a message. Yes. Brielle looked back toward the wall where the rogue wolves had vanished.
They wanted to see if you would intervene. Maverick nodded. Someone inside the fortress already knows I'm here, which means the conspiracy is watching us. Exactly. For a moment, Brielle said nothing. Then she realized something else. Those wolves weren't trying to kill me. No, they were trying to flush you out. Maverick met her gaze. And now they know exactly how dangerous I am. Brielle exhaled slowly. So the game just changed. Yes. Below them, Captain Rourke shouted new patrol orders. Guards scrambled across the courtyard. But Brielle was already thinking 3 moves ahead. Good, she said quietly. Maverick studied her expression. You're not worried? No. Why? Brielle turned toward the balcony door, because now the pieces finally made sense. They just confirmed something.
What? They're afraid of us working together.
Maverick's eyes narrowed slightly.
That's possible. No, Brielle corrected. It's certain. She paused in the doorway, looking back at him. And that means our trap will work. Maverick crossed his arms slowly. You're enjoying this. A little. Why? Brielle smiled faintly. Because whoever is behind this conspiracy just made a mistake. What mistake? They showed their hand too early. The wind swept across the balcony again, carrying the fading scent of rogue wolves. But something else moved in the darkness beyond the fortress walls. Watching. Waiting. And somewhere far below the mountain, a hidden figure received the news. The Alpha had revealed himself, which meant the next move could finally begin. Chapter 6. The Council Betrayal. Morning came to the fortress with the slow gray light of mountain winter. But the quiet did not feel peaceful. It felt tense. The kind of tension wolves feel before a storm breaks across the mountains. Brielle had barely slept, not because she feared another attack, but because she had spent most of the night thinking. Every move the conspirators had made now formed a pattern in her mind. The assassin, the knife, the hidden message, the rogue wolves testing the walls. All of it pointed to one conclusion. Someone inside the Crescent Council had begun a war long before anyone realized it. And that someone believed Brielle Conti was dangerous enough to eliminate, which meant one thing. She was getting closer to the truth. Brielle stood at the long table in the strategy chamber, overlooking the eastern cliffs. Maps covered the surface. Trade routes, pack territories, supply roads, military paths. The same routes Maverick had mentioned during dinner. But now Brielle was seeing them differently. Not as trade networks, as war corridors. A door opened behind her. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor. You work too early. Maverick's voice carried through the chamber with quiet amusement. Brielle did not look up from the map she was studying. And you sleep too late. It's barely sunrise. For wolves, perhaps. Maverick moved beside the table. He glanced down at the maps. Several routes had been marked with charcoal circles. You're mapping invasion paths? Yes. You believe the war will start in Crescent territory. Brielle nodded. The supply lines make the most sense here. She tapped a narrow mountain pass drawn near the center of the map. This corridor controls access to 3 valleys, and if someone controlled this pass, they could move an army through Crescent Land before anyone realized what was happening. Maverick studied the route carefully. Then something in his expression sharpened. You blocked a steel shipment 2 weeks ago. Yes, and if those weapons had arrived, Brielle finished the thought, the conspirators would already control the corridor. Silence filled the chamber, because the implications were obvious. The assassination attempt had not been revenge. It was strategy. Brielle had disrupted the opening move of the war, which meant the conspirators could not allow her to continue interfering. Maverick leaned back slightly against the table. You're more dangerous than they expected. Apparently, and they will escalate. Yes. A knock interrupted them. Captain Rourke stepped inside. His expression told Brielle everything before he even spoke. The council has arrived. Brielle exhaled slowly. Already? They rode through the night. Maverick's eyes narrowed slightly. That's fast. Too fast, Brielle agreed, because council members did not rush unless something serious had happened, or unless they were trying to control a situation. Who came? She asked. Rourke hesitated. Lord Maverick. Maverick glanced at Brielle. Interesting. Yes, Brielle said quietly. Very. Lord Maverick was the most senior member of the Crescent Council, a man who had survived 4 alpha regimes and 3 political revolutions. He did not travel without purpose, and he certainly did not ride overnight through mountain snow. Where is he now? Brielle asked. In the Great Hall. Good. Brielle rolled up the map slowly. Then she turned toward the door. Let's hear what he has to say. The Great Hall had been prepared again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Less ceremonial, more confrontational. Several council guards stood along the walls, too many for a simple diplomatic visit. Brielle noticed that immediately. Maverick noticed it too. Lord Maverick stood near the center of the hall, tall, lean, his silver hair tied behind his neck. His expression, calm, too calm. When Brielle entered the hall, his eyes fixed on her instantly. Not warmly, not angrily, carefully, like a chess player examining a board. Brielle Conti, he said. His voice carried easily through the hall. I heard disturbing news. Brielle approached without hesitation. Yes, there was an attack last night. There was. An assassin inside your fortress. That appears to be the case. Maverick folded his hands behind his back. And the attacker escaped? Yes.
A brief pause followed. Then Maverick's gaze shifted slightly toward Maverick. Alpha Varen. Maverick inclined his head slightly. Lord Maverick. I did not expect to find you here. And yet here I am. Maverick's expression remained unreadable. This situation concerns the Crescent Council. And yet the assassin used a council blade, Maverick replied calmly. Murmurs moved through the guards along the wall. Maverick's eyes flickered briefly toward the knife Brielle had placed on the nearby table. Yes, he said quietly. That is troubling. Brielle watched him closely, waiting. Because this was the moment the game would begin. Maverick turned back toward her, which is why the council has made a decision. Here it comes, Brielle thought. We are relieving you of command of this fortress.
She's sharper than the others warned. Most negotiators panic when power is taken from them. They argue, they plead, they expose their weaknesses. But Brielle Conti didn't panic. She redirected the board. Dangerous. Very dangerous. For years, we kept the old bloodlines buried beneath council authority. The northern packs follow strength, not politics. If they discover what she truly is, everything we built collapses. Which means the next attempt cannot fail. The girl cannot be allowed to awaken fully. And if the Alpha Varen protects her, then he will have to fall with her.
The dark words dropped into the hall like falling stone. Captain Rourke's hand moved instantly toward his sword. What? He growled. Maverick did not even look at him. Instead, his eyes stayed fixed on Brielle. You have clearly lost control of the situation. There has been a breach of security, and an assassin remains at large. Brielle's expression did not change. Go on. The council believes it would be safer for everyone if another commander assumed responsibility. Rourke stepped forward. With respect, Lord Maverick, that's ridiculous. But Brielle raised one hand. The captain stopped immediately. Because this was the moment she had been waiting for. The conspirators had finally made their move, and they had made it publicly, which meant their plan was now visible. Brielle walked slowly toward the table where the knife rested. She picked it up calmly. This blade carries the council mark. Yes, Maverick said. And someone used it to try to kill me. That appears to be the case. And your response is to remove me from command. Yes. Brielle turned the blade slowly in the torchlight. Then she looked up again.
I agree. The hall went silent. Even Maverick's eyebrows lifted slightly. You agree? Maverick asked carefully. Yes. Brielle placed the knife back on the table. If the council believes I'm the problem, then perhaps someone else should investigate this conspiracy. Maverick watched her closely now, trying to understand the shift, because Brielle Conti did not surrender authority easily. Maverick crossed his arms, watching the exchange with growing interest. What do you propose? Maverick asked. Brielle smiled slightly. I think the council should appoint a special investigator to find the assassin and the traitor who hired him. Maverick's eyes narrowed slightly. And who would that investigator be? Brielle gestured calmly toward Maverick. The Alpha who stopped the attack. The room erupted into murmurs. Council guards exchanged uneasy glances, because the idea was outrageous, allowing an outside Alpha to investigate the Crescent Council itself. But Brielle continued before anyone could object. After all, she said calmly, if the council no longer trusts me, then someone else should find the truth. Silence returned to the hall. Maverick studied her carefully, because suddenly the situation had reversed. The conspirators had expected Brielle to fight, to defend her position. Instead, she had shifted the entire battlefield, and now the investigation would move outside the council's control. Maverick slowly stepped forward. Well, that's an interesting proposal. Brielle met his gaze. I thought you'd like it. Maverick's expression darkened slightly, because he understood what had just happened. Brielle Conti had not lost control of the situation. She had just turned the entire council into suspects. And somewhere in the hall, one of the guards quietly slipped away from the wall, because the conspirators inside the fortress had just realized their plan had failed, and the woman they tried to remove was now hunting them. Chapter 7. The Alpha's Discovery. The fortress changed after the council meeting. Not visibly. The walls were the same. The guards still walked their patrols. Torches still burned along the battlements. But wolves notice things humans miss. Scent shifts. Footsteps pause too long outside doors. Eyes linger where they shouldn't. And now the entire fortress smelled like suspicion. Brielle stood again on the eastern balcony overlooking the cliffs. The wind was stronger tonight. Storm winds moving down from the northern peaks. Perfect weather for wolves. Perfect weather for hunters. Below her, the patrol wolves moved carefully through the inner yard. Not relaxed anymore. Alert. The assassination attempt had changed them. Because when a pack learns one of its own may be a traitor, every wolf becomes a stranger. You're doing it again. Maverick's voice came from behind her. Brielle didn't turn. What doing? Thinking too loudly. That seems to bother you. It makes you predictable. That finally earned him a glance. You think I'm predictable? No, Maverick said calmly. I think your enemies hope you are. He moved to the railing beside her. For a moment, they watched the courtyard below together. Several wolves moved through torchlight, their massive forms casting long shadows against the stone. Maverick inhaled slowly. Your wolves are restless. They should be. They don't trust the guards anymore. No. Maverick looked down at the courtyard again. But they trust you. That's different. Why? Because wolves know when someone belongs to the pack. Maverick's gaze shifted slowly toward her. And do you? Brielle raised an eyebrow. Do I what? Belong to the pack? She turned fully toward him now. That's an odd question. Is it? Yes. You're the Crescent Council's chief negotiator. Yes. You command this fortress. Yes. You've spent years negotiating between alpha packs. Yes. And yet, Maverick's eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned slightly closer. Your scent doesn't match any of them. For the first time since the attack, Brielle felt something close to surprise. You're mistaken. No. Maverick's voice was quiet but certain. I noticed it yesterday. When? In the courtyard. While you were watching the rogue wolves. Brielle held his gaze carefully. Explain. Maverick tapped the stone railing with one finger. Every pack has a scent. Territory. Bloodline.
Hierarchy. You carry the scent of crescent wolves. That makes sense. But underneath it, his voice lowered slightly. There's something else. The wind swept across the balcony, carrying distant snow from the mountains. Brielle turned away again. You're imagining things. No. Maverick's answer came immediately. I'm an alpha. I can smell bloodlines, and yours doesn't belong here. The silence that followed was heavier than the wind, because Brielle knew something Maverick didn't. Her father had told her the same thing once, years ago, but he had never explained what it meant. You're wrong, she said calmly. Maverick studied her profile. You're hiding something. That's a dangerous accusation. Is it untrue? Brielle didn't answer, which was answer enough. Maverick leaned against the railing again. You're not just a negotiator. You're not just a council officer. And you're definitely not just human. That last statement hung in the air between them, because in the Northern Territories, almost everyone carried some wolf bloodline, but Maverick wasn't talking about ordinary bloodlines. He was talking about something older, stronger, something hidden, careful, Brielle said quietly. You're starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist. Maverick's expression didn't change. No, I'm starting to sound like someone who's noticed something very interesting. Before Brielle could reply, a howl echoed across the mountains, sharp, urgent. The patrol wolves below froze instantly. Maverick straightened. That's not one of yours. No, the howl came again. Closer this time. A signal, but not a crescent signal. Maverick's eyes darkened. That's a war call. Brielle's mind immediately began calculating distances. How far? Half a mile, and moving fast. A second howl answered the first, then a third, then several more. The sound rolled through the mountains like distant thunder. Brielle felt something stir deep in her chest, something instinctive, something ancient. Her heart began beating faster, not with fear, with recognition. Maverick noticed immediately. Your wolf hears them. Brielle forced her breathing steady. I don't have a wolf. Maverick's eyes sharpened. That's not true. Before Brielle could respond, the fortress alarm bell began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. The signal for an approaching threat. Guards rushed into the courtyard below, crossbows raised. Captain Rourke's voice echoed across the walls. Positions! Maverick moved toward the balcony edge, scanning the dark slopes beyond the fortress. Then he saw them. Rogue pack, he said quietly. How many? At least 15. Brielle swore under her breath. That was not a scouting party. That was a hunting group, which meant the conspirators had escalated again. Why now? Maverick's voice was calm. Because the council just lost control of the investigation. They're panicking. Exactly. Below them, the first rogue wolves appeared on the outer ridge. Dark shapes moving through snow. Large, fast, organized. Not ordinary rogues. These wolves moved like trained fighters. Mercenaries, Maverick muttered. Brielle understood immediately. Someone hired them. Yes, and they're not here to test the walls. No, they're here to finish the job. The first rogue wolf leapt toward the outer gate. A crossbow bolt struck its shoulder. The wolf barely slowed.
Another wolf cleared the outer wall seconds later, then a third. The battle erupted instantly. Claws, fangs, fur, and blood under the torchlight. Crescent wolves collided with the invaders in brutal silence. This was not a skirmish. This was a pack war. Maverick stepped away from the balcony. "Stay inside." Brielle laughed once. "You're joking." "No, you're the target. And you're the only alpha here." Maverick's eyes flashed slightly. "That's exactly why you should stay inside." Brielle moved toward the door. "You're going to need help. I have a wolf. So do they." Maverick blocked the doorway. "You don't." Brielle met his gaze calmly. "Are you sure about that?" For a moment, Maverick studied her carefully. Then the howl of the approaching wolves echoed again. Closer now. Much closer. The battle had already begun. And somewhere, deep inside Brielle's chest, something ancient stirred awake, watching, waiting, ready. Chapter 8. The Awakening. The fortress alarm bell continued to ring. Once, twice, again and again. The sound rolled across the mountain valley like thunder. Below the balcony, the courtyard had exploded in movement. Guards rushed to defensive positions. Crossbows were loaded. Massive crescent wolves took their places along the inner walls. But even from the balcony, Brielle could see something troubling. The rogue wolves approaching the fortress were not behaving like ordinary rogues. They moved in formation, spreading out along the ridge, testing angles, searching for weaknesses in the defenses. Professional. Disciplined. Which meant Maverick was right. These wolves were mercenaries, hired killers, and they were hunting her. Maverick stepped forward onto the balcony ledge again. His eyes scanned the snow-covered ridges beyond the fortress. "They're faster than I expected." "How long?" 2 minutes. "That's not long." "No." Below them, Captain Rourke shouted new orders. "Archers ready! Hold the outer gate." 3 crescent wolves took position at the base of the tower stairs. Massive creatures with silver fur and thick shoulders. Pack guardians. Elite defenders. But even Brielle could tell something was wrong. The rogue wolves were not slowing down. They were accelerating, charging the walls at full speed. "That's reckless," said Brielle. Maverick shook his head. "No, it's calculated." "Why?" "Because they're not trying to breach the fortress." "Then what?" "They're trying to flush you out." The first rogue wolf leapt onto the outer gate. A crossbow bolt struck its shoulder. The wolf barely slowed. Another wolf cleared the outer wall seconds later. Then a third. The battle erupted instantly. Claws, fangs, fur, and blood under the torchlight. Crescent wolves collided with the invaders in brutal silence. This was not a skirmish. This was a pack war. Maverick stepped away from the balcony. "Stay inside." Brielle laughed once. "You're joking." "No, you're the target. And you're the only alpha here." Maverick's eyes flashed slightly. "That's exactly why you should stay inside." Brielle moved toward the door. "You're going to need help. I have a wolf. So do they." Maverick blocked the doorway. "You don't." Brielle met his gaze calmly. "Are you sure about that?" For a moment, Maverick studied her carefully. Then the howl of the approaching wolves echoed again. Closer now. Much closer. The battle had already begun. And somewhere, deep inside Brielle's chest, something ancient stirred awake, watching, waiting, ready.
Brielle hesitated, because something inside her chest had begun to change. The distant howls, the scent of wolves, the rising violence in the courtyard, all of it was triggering something instinctive, something powerful. Her heartbeat was faster now, stronger, her senses sharper. She could smell the snow, the iron scent of blood below, the wild musk of the rogue wolves outside the walls. Maverick watched her carefully. "You've felt it before?" "Yes." "When?" "During fights, or danger, or when wolves are near." Maverick nodded slowly. That's not unusual for shifter blood, but this, he studied her more closely. This is different. Another howl shattered the night, much closer. The outer gate finally broke. Wood splintered. Iron hinges snapped. 3 rogue wolves burst into the courtyard. Guards fired again. 2 wolves fell, but the third cleared the line of defenders.
It ran directly toward the tower, toward Brielle. Maverick moved instantly. In one smooth motion, he stepped between her and the open balcony door. "Inside," he ordered. Brielle didn't move. Instead, she felt the strange pressure inside her chest intensify, like something waking up, something ancient. Maverick noticed. Brielle. Her breath caught. Her fingers curled slightly. "You feel it?" "Yes." The rogue wolf hit the base of the tower stairs seconds later. The Crescent Guardians lunged to intercept it. One of them slammed into the rogue's side. They tumbled across the stone steps, growling, snarling. But the rogue wolf was stronger. It threw the Crescent Guardian aside and continued climbing, straight toward the balcony. Maverick shifted. His massive wolf form turned slightly toward her, because Brielle's scent had changed. The rogue wolf noticed too. It stopped growling, its ears flattened, confused, because the woman behind the alpha suddenly smelled like something else, something older, something dangerous. Maverick slowly stepped aside, not fully, but enough. He wanted to see what would happen next. The rogue wolf took one cautious step forward, toward Brielle, then another, testing, hunting, but Brielle didn't step back. Instead, she stepped forward, and the moment she did, the rogue wolf collapsed, flat against the stone, whining, submission, total, absolute. The courtyard below fell silent, because every wolf in the fortress felt it, a pulse of dominance, not Maverick's, Brielle's. The alpha wolf turned slowly, studying her, understanding spreading through his instincts, because there was only one explanation. The woman standing behind him was not merely a strategist. She was something far rarer, something almost forgotten in the Northern Territories, an alpha blood wolf, even if she had never shifted before. The rogue wolf whimpered again, still pressed flat to the stone, too terrified to move. Brielle stared down at it, her heart racing, her senses blazing. "What did I just do?" she whispered. Maverick shifted back to human form slowly. His expression was no longer amused or curious. Now it was something else entirely. Recognition. "You commanded it. I didn't mean to. That doesn't matter." Maverick stepped closer, his voice lower now, almost reverent. "Your wolf just revealed itself." Brielle looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly, not from fear, from power. "That's impossible." "No." Maverick's head shook slowly. "It's extremely rare, but not impossible." Brielle's mind raced. "My father said something like this once." "What?" "That our bloodline came from an old pack." Maverick exhaled slowly. Not just an old pack. He looked back toward the rogue wolf, still frozen in submission. A ruling pack. And suddenly the entire war in the Crescent Council made far more sense. Because if Brielle Conti carried alpha blood, then the conspirators had not been trying to kill a negotiator. They had been trying to eliminate an alpha before she even realized what she was. And somewhere beyond the fortress walls, the hidden mastermind behind the conspiracy had just received terrible news. The target had awakened, which meant the war was about to become far more dangerous than anyone expected. Chapter 9. The Alpha's Choice. For several long seconds, no one in the courtyard moved. Not the guards, not the wolves, not even the rogue wolf still flattened against the stone floor beneath the balcony, because every wolf in the fortress had felt it. That pulse of dominance, the kind that only came from a true alpha bloodline. And it had not come from Maverick Varen, it had come from Brielle. Below the balcony, the Crescent Wolves had stopped fighting entirely. Several of them had lowered their heads. Not fully in submission, but in recognition. The rogue wolves beyond the broken gate had retreated several steps, their ears pinned flat against their skulls. They were afraid, not of Maverick, of her. Brielle slowly exhaled. Her heart was still racing, her senses still too sharp. She could hear the snow shifting beneath the wolves' paws below. She could smell the iron tang of blood from the fallen rogues, and beneath it all, she could feel something alive inside her chest. A presence. A wolf. Ancient. Watching. Waiting. "What did I just do?" she asked quietly. Maverick did not answer immediately. He was watching her the way alphas watch a newly revealed rival, carefully, respectfully, and with a hint of caution. "You didn't just dominate that wolf," he said finally. "You commanded it." "I didn't mean to." "That doesn't matter." Maverick stepped closer. The crescent wolves in the courtyard shifted uneasily, because now 2 alpha presences stood within the same space, even if one of them had only just awakened. Maverick continued, "You've been suppressing your wolf for years." "That's impossible." "No." He gestured toward the rogue wolf. "Ask him." The rogue wolf still hadn't moved. It remained pressed flat against the stone, whimpering softly. Brielle stared at the creature. A strange sensation tugged at the edge of her awareness, something instinctive. Without thinking, she took another step forward. The rogue wolf whimpered louder, its tail tucked tightly beneath its body. Submission. Absolute. The sensation inside Brielle's chest intensified. Her wolf was reacting, recognizing dominance, recognizing territory, recognizing something else, too. Pack. Maverick noticed the shift immediately. "Careful," he said quietly. "Why?" "Your wolf is waking up." "And that's dangerous?" "For everyone around you." Before Brielle could respond, another howl echoed from beyond the fortress walls, different from the others. Longer. Deeper. Maverick's head snapped toward the mountains. "That's their alpha." Brielle's heart skipped. "Did they bring an alpha?" "Yes. And he's close." The rogue wolves outside the gates suddenly moved again, but this time they did not charge the courtyard. Instead, they formed a line along the ridge, waiting, watching. Then the alpha appeared. He stepped onto the broken gate slowly. Massive, larger than any wolf Brielle had ever seen. His fur was dark gray, streaked with white scars. His eyes glowed gold in the torchlight. A battle alpha. Old, experienced, and dangerous. The rogue alpha pack shifted around him instantly. Respect. Hierarchy. Maverick's expression hardened. This just became complicated. Brielle's pulse quickened again. Why? That wolf isn't a mercenary. Then what is he? Maverick's voice lowered slightly. He's a pack leader. And someone powerful convinced him to come here. The rogue alpha lifted his head slowly. His gaze moved across the courtyard, measuring the guards, the wolves, the defenses. Then his eyes locked on the balcony, onto Brielle. The effect was immediate. The alpha's ears flattened, his body stiffened, because he felt it too. Her dominance, her bloodline. The rogue alpha growled low, uncertain. Then he did something strange. He didn't attack. Instead, he lowered his head slightly, testing, acknowledging. Maverick noticed immediately. He feels it. What? Your bloodline. The rogue alpha took one step forward, then another. But instead of charging, he stopped and bowed. The courtyard gasped. Even the guards understood what that meant.
The rogue alpha had just acknowledged Brielle's authority, not Maverick's, hers. Brielle stared down at the wolf in disbelief. I didn't ask for that. Maverick exhaled slowly. It doesn't matter. Why? Because every wolf in this valley just felt that moment. And news travels quickly between packs. The rogue alpha lifted his head again. He studied Brielle one last time. Then he turned. Without a single command, the rogue pack followed him. They vanished back into the mountains as quickly as they had arrived. Within seconds, the ridge was empty again. The fortress courtyard fell silent. Captain Rourke filed a spoke from below. What just happened? Maverick answered quietly. The war changed. Brielle turned toward him. How? Because every alpha in the Northern Territories will hear about tonight. And when they do, they'll realize something very important. What? Maverick's eyes locked on hers. The Crescent Council has been hiding an alpha blood heir. Brielle felt her stomach tighten. That's ridiculous. Is it? I'm not an alpha. You just made a rival alpha bow. That doesn't make me a ruler. Maverick's voice softened slightly. No, but that makes you a threat. Silence settled between them again, because both of them understood the truth. If Brielle carried alpha blood, then every pack in the north would eventually come looking for her. Some to follow, some to control, and some to kill. Maverick stepped closer again. So now, I have a decision to make. What kind of decision? His voice dropped slightly. The kind every alpha must make when another alpha appears. Brielle's eyes narrowed. You're deciding whether to kill me. Maverick shook his head slowly. No. Then what? His expression shifted slightly. Something more complicated. More dangerous. I'm deciding whether to protect you. And why would you do that? Maverick's answer came quietly. Because if the Crescent Council realizes what you are, they won't stop sending assassins. And if rival packs learn the truth, they will come hunting. The wind swept across the courtyard again. Cold. Sharp. Brielle crossed her arms slowly. So your solution is what? Maverick studied her carefully.
Then he said something that made the tension between them change entirely. You stay with me. Brielle blinked. That's not happening. You don't have a choice. I always have a choice. Not if you want to survive what's coming. Brielle stepped closer to him. So you're offering protection? Yes. And what do you want in return? Maverick didn't hesitate. Your alliance. Against the conspiracy. Yes. And the war that's coming. Brielle considered him carefully, because for the first time since this strange contract began, the negotiation felt honest. But there was still one problem. You forgot something, she said quietly. What? She pointed toward the parchment still folded on the nearby table. The contract. Maverick followed her gaze. Then he smiled slightly. That clause? Yes. No falling in love? Brielle nodded. Exactly. Maverick leaned closer. Close enough that his voice dropped to a near whisper. That clause wasn't written to protect me. Then who was it written for? Maverick's eyes held hers. For both of us. Because the moment Brielle's wolf awakened, the alpha bond between them had begun to form, and both of them knew something dangerous had just started, something neither contracts nor politics would be able to stop. Chapter 10. The Mate Bond. The courtyard slowly returned to order. Guards dragged the bodies of the fallen rogue wolves away from the broken gate. Crescent wolves shifted back into human form along the walls, speaking in low, uneasy voices. No one laughed. No one relaxed, because every wolf present had witnessed something they did not fully understand. Brielle Conti had made a rogue alpha bow. That kind of dominance did not belong to ordinary wolves, and word of it would spread faster than wildfire across the northern territories. Brielle stood quietly on the balcony, watching the last of the patrols reorganize. The strange energy inside her chest had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Her senses felt heightened, sharper, alive. She could hear conversations in the courtyard clearly, despite the distance. She could smell the approaching storm rolling down from the northern peaks. Even the cold mountain air felt different against her skin. It felt good. Too good. "You're feeling it." Maverick's voice broke the silence behind her. Brielle did not turn. "Yes." "That won't fade quickly." "How long?" Maverick stepped beside her again. His expression had changed since the rogue alpha's retreat. Less guarded, more thoughtful. "For new alpha blood?" He considered the question. "Hours, maybe days." Brielle finally looked at him. "And after that?" "You'll start learning control." "That assumes I want this." Maverick's eyebrow lifted slightly. "You don't?" "I built my life as a strategist, negotiator, council advisor, and now you're telling me I'm secretly a pack alpha?" "Yes." "That's inconvenient." "Yes." Brielle looked back down at the courtyard. "You seem very calm about this." "I've seen stranger things." "Such as?" "An alpha bloodline hidden inside a council negotiator." "That still sounds ridiculous." "It does." The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of distant snow, and something else. Something Maverick noticed instantly. His body stiffened. Brielle saw the reaction. "What is it?" Maverick did not answer immediately. Instead, he inhaled slowly again, like he had earlier on the balcony, testing the air. Then his gaze shifted toward her. "You smell different." "That's not surprising." "Yes, it is." "Why?" Maverick hesitated, and Brielle suddenly realized something strange. The alpha standing beside her looked unsettled. "You recognize the scent," she said quietly. "Yes." "But you don't like it?" "That's not the problem." "Then what is?" Maverick exhaled slowly. "Your wolf just woke up." "Yes." "And when a dormant wolf awakes, it establishes connections." "What kind of connections?" Maverick's voice lowered slightly. "The kind that complicate negotiations." That answer made her suspicious. "You're avoiding the question." "Yes." "Why?" Maverick hesitated. Then he said the one thing Brielle had not expected. "Because I'm trying to decide if it's real." Her stomach tightened slightly. "What is?" Maverick looked directly into her eyes now. "The bond." The word hung between them like a live spark. Brielle blinked once. "You mean a political alliance?" "No." "A pack agreement?" "No." Maverick's voice was quieter now, more serious. "I mean a mate bond." For a moment, Brielle simply stared at him. Then she laughed, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "That's impossible." "Yes. I've never even shifted." "I know. And we met yesterday." "I know. So you're telling me," she gestured between them, "that some ancient wolf instinct decided we belong together?" Maverick crossed his arms slowly. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Brielle had the Sheknas. "That's ridiculous." "Yes." "And you believe it?" Maverick's expression hardened slightly. "I believe my instincts." "And your instincts are never wrong?" "Rarely." Brielle studied him carefully. "Convenient." "For whom?" "For the alpha who suddenly wants the only other alpha blood wolf in the region under his protection." Maverick didn't react to the accusation, which made Brielle even more suspicious. "You think I'm manipulating you? You think I'm an alpha? That's fair." "And alphas are used to getting what they want."
Yes, but not like this. Brielle's voice softened slightly. Then prove it. Maverick frowned slightly. How? Walk away. The challenge hung in the air between them. If Maverick was lying, walking away would be easy. If he was telling the truth, his wolf would resist. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Maverick stepped back. Once, twice, 3 steps away from her, and stopped. His jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't move closer again. There, he said. I walked away. Brielle studied him carefully. You stopped? Yes. Why? Maverick's voice dropped slightly. Because that's as far as my wolf will let me go. Brielle's stomach twisted again. She hated that answer.
Because part of her believed him, and that was far more dangerous than the bond itself. Below them, Captain Rourke finished organizing the guards. The fortress was secure again, but the night had changed everything. Maverick leaned back against the balcony railing. You should know something. What? The conspirators inside the council will learn about tonight. Yes. And when they realize you're alpha blood, they'll panic. Yes. And panic makes people reckless. Brielle nodded slowly. Good. Maverick glanced sideways at her. That's an unusual response. I prefer enemies who panic. Why? Because calm enemies are harder to defeat. Maverick watched her for a moment, then he shook his head slightly. You really are dangerous. Brielle smiled faintly. You noticed? The wind grew stronger. Storm clouds rolled across the peaks, and somewhere deep in the mountains, another wolf howled. Not a rogue, not a hunter, a messenger. Maverick heard it immediately. His expression darkened. That's not good. What? That howl carries a pack signal. What kind? Maverick looked toward the mountains. A summoning call. For what? His answer came quietly. For alphas. Brielle felt the weight of the moment settle over them. How many? Maverick's voice was calm. Possibly all of them. Because the moment Brielle awakened her alpha bloodline, the balance of power in the Northern Territories had changed forever, and every alpha would want to see the woman responsible. Chapter 11. The Gathering of Alphas. The first alpha arrived before noon. Brielle knew it before the scouts announced him. The mountain air changed. Wolves felt power the way sailors felt storms. It rolled ahead of its owner, pressing against the edges of the fortress like an unseen hand. Brielle stood at the highest eastern window of the strategy tower, watching snow shift in silver waves across the lower path. Captain Rourke stood beside her with 2 scouts, all 3 of them tense. Which pack? Brielle asked. The younger scout swallowed. Stonefang. Maverick, leaning against the far side of the map table, lifted his head. That was fast. Brielle glanced at him. You expected them later? I expected them cautious. And they're not? No. Maverick pushed away from the table. Stonefang follows strength. If they heard an alpha blood female made a rogue bow, they'd come running to see if it was true. Brielle looked back out the window. A dark line moved below through the snow. Not an army, a delegation. 5 wolves in human form surrounding one central figure, broad-shouldered and iron-haired, wearing a black winter cloak trimmed in gray fur. Even from this distance, Brielle could see the confidence in the way he walked. He looks like he already owns the mountain, she said. Maverick's mouth barely moved. That would be Terran Stonefang. Dangerous? Yes. Honest. Considered. Painfully. Rourke muttered under his breath. I prefer liars. They're easier to prepare for. Brielle turned from the window.
Open the outer gate. Keep the inner gate barred until I say otherwise. Work frowned. You're admitting him? I'm receiving him. And if he challenges you? Brielle held his gaze calmly. Then he challenges me. The captain did not like that answer, but he nodded and left with the scouts. The moment the door closed, silence settled over the tower. Maverick watched her carefully. You're steady. I'm thinking. About Stonefang? About all of them. Maverick crossed the room slowly. There will be more. I know. Some will test you. Yes. Some will try to use you. Brielle folded her arms. And some will try to kill you. Maverick stopped in front of her. Also yes. She exhaled through her nose. Good. Clear situations are easier. That almost earned him a smile. Almost. You really don't frighten easily. No, Brielle said, but I do get annoyed. The corner of Maverick's mouth shifted. That I believe. A horn sounded from the lower gate. One long note, then two short. Arrival. Brielle straightened. Come with me. Maverick's eyes narrowed slightly. As what? She looked at him once directly. As the alpha who wrote a contract and accidentally started a civil crisis. He actually laughed at that, low and brief. Then he followed her. The courtyard was full when Brielle stepped out. Guards lined the walls. Crescent wolves stood in human form near the inner stair, alert but disciplined. The broken outer gate had been temporarily reinforced with iron bars and heavy timber. Snow swirled through the opening in thin white ribbons. Terran Stonefang stood in the center of the yard as though he had been born there. He was older than Maverick, Brielle realized immediately. Not weakened by age, but sharpened by it. His wolf sat close beneath his skin. She could feel it in the air around him. When Brielle descended the last step into the courtyard, every eye shifted toward her. Terran looked at her once. Then he looked at Maverick. Then back at her again. Interesting, his expression said. Very interesting. You're Brielle Conti, he said. His voice was rough as mountain bark. Yes. I expected taller. Brielle did not blink. I expected subtler. A few of the Crescent Wolves' guards made the mistake of almost smiling. Maverick stayed perfectly still beside her. Terran's eyes sharpened. Then, unexpectedly, he barked a laugh. Good, he said. Too many council people talk like wet paper. I'll try to be drier than that. Another quick laugh. Then he sobered. The story says you made a rogue alpha submit. I did. The story says you have not yet fully shifted. That also appears to be true. Terran studied her a long moment. Then, without warning, he stepped closer. The courtyard tensed. Maverick's shoulders changed first. Brielle felt it before she saw it. The alpha beside him had not moved, but the air around him had hardened. Terran noticed that too. Relax, Varen, he said without looking away from Brielle. If I meant violence, you'd already know. Maverick's reply was quiet. I already know. The temperature of the courtyard seemed to drop 10 degrees. Brielle looked from one alpha to the other and thought, this will be exhausting. Terran stopped a pace away from her and inhaled once. Not rudely, not intimately, like a wolf confirming a fact. His eyes changed. The humor vanished. By the old blood, he said quietly, it's real.
So the rumors were true. I expected politics, council lies, maybe a clever trick by Varen. But this girl, she carries the old scent. Not just alpha dominance, ruling blood. The kind our ancestors used to follow before the councils started pretending they controlled the North. If the other alphas smell what I smell, This fortress will become the center of a storm. Some will swear loyalty. Some will try to cage her. And the fools will try to kill her. But there's one thing they don't understand yet. The girl doesn't know how powerful she is.
No one in the courtyard spoke. Brielle held his gaze. What exactly is real? Tehran straightened. Your line. I'm glad that clears things up for you. It does nothing for me. He looked almost impressed again. You truly don't know. No one has explained it properly. Maverick's voice came from beside her because no one wanted her to. Tehran glanced at him once, then back to Brielle. The old ruling lines were not all destroyed. Some were broken, hidden, buried inside lesser houses and council families until the world forgot what they were. Alpha blood, Brielle said. Older than that. She felt something shift inside her chest again, her wolf listening. How much older? Tehran's expression turned grim. Old enough that if the other packs confirm it, half the North will try to swear to you, and the other half will try to cut your throat before that happens. Rourke, standing near the stair behind her, swore softly. Brielle did not turn. That is inconvenient. Tehran gave her a hard look. Girl, that is catastrophe. Before she could answer, another horn sounded, then another, and another after that. The whole courtyard changed. Maverick's head lifted toward the gate. They're all coming at once. Who? Brielle asked. Tehran's face darkened. The ones who don't like waiting. The second arrival was Silver Hollow, then Red Claw, then Frostmere. Within an hour, the courtyard had become a map of the Northern Territories in living form. Alpha leaders, heirs, battle captains, elite wolves, all stepping through the snow under banners and winter cloaks, all pretending they had come for diplomacy, when in truth they had come for one reason only: to see Brielle, to assess whether the rumor was true, to decide what to do with her if it was. By mid-afternoon, the great hall was full. Brielle stood at the head of the central platform, Maverick on her right, Captain Rourke and 2 Crescent guards below, as the gathered alphas and their representatives filled the benches and standing rows beyond. No one shouted. That would have been easier. Instead, the room buzzed with restrained power and political danger. It was worse. Pack leaders whispered to their seconds. Heirs watched Brielle openly. Older wolves studied her as if searching for signs in the shape of her face. Across the room, Lord Maverick had appeared again, smooth and silver-haired, standing with 3 council officers behind him and the expression of a man observing a regrettable weather event. Brielle noticed him immediately. So did Maverick. He leaned slightly toward her. He came quickly. Yes. He's nervous. Yes. You smell it. She glanced sideways at him. No, I can read a room. His gaze stayed on Maverick. I can do both. That would have been amusing in almost any other moment. Then Tehran Stonefang stepped into the center of the hall and raised one hand. Silence spread outward. I came because I heard an impossible thing, he said. I have now confirmed that it is not impossible. A low ripple passed through the gathered wolves. Tehran kept speaking. Brielle Conti carries old blood. More silence. Then sound broke everywhere at once. Not chaos, not yet, but sharp voices, questions, denials, demands. Red Claw's alpha, a scar-faced woman named Maressa, stood first. Old blood does not survive hidden inside council walls. Tehran turned to her, and yet here she stands. Silver Hollow's representative narrowed his eyes. Assent is not a claim. No, Maverick said from beside Brielle, but a rogue alpha bowing is. That shut several mouths at once.
Lord Maverick chose that moment to step forward. How dramatic, a fascinating afternoon for everyone, but perhaps we should remember that Brielle Conti is an officer of the Crescent Council, not a pack claimant. Brielle did not move. That sounded prepared. Maverick gave her a small, polite smile. Someone in this room should remain practical. And practical means what? Tehran asked, already sounding annoyed. Maverick spread one hand. It means that northern stability matters more than rumor, instinct, or ancient pack myths. If Brielle possesses unusual blood, the council will examine the matter appropriately. Maverick's voice sharpened. Appropriately. Several wolves in the hall growled. The council officers behind Maverick stiffened. Brielle watched him carefully. Every word she chose was tidy, controlled, but beneath the polish she could finally see the outline of his fear. He did not want the packs near her. He did not want her tested. He did not want the truth established outside council control. Which meant Tehran was right. This was catastrophe, and Maverick knew exactly why. Red Claw's Marissa folded her arms. No council decides pack blood. Tehran nodded once. Agreed. Silver Hollow's alpha rose slowly next. Then there is only one proper course. Every eye in the hall shifted toward him. He looked directly at Brielle. Prove it. The word landed like iron. Brielle felt the hall pulled tighter around her. Maverick moved too quickly. No. That was his mistake. Too fast, too sharp. Every wolf in the room heard it. Tehran's head turned to him with open interest. No? Maverick recovered a fraction too late. For her safety, he said. She has not trained, she has not shifted. A public challenge would be irresponsible. There it was. Not concern, control. Maverick's voice was quiet now, which made it more dangerous. You are very invested in preventing that. He met his gaze. I am invested in preventing bloodshed. Brielle finally stepped forward. The hall stilled again. She looked at Maverick first, then at the gathered alphas, and then she made the choice the conspiracy had been trying desperately to prevent. I'll do it, she said.
The room erupted. Rourke muttered something dark under his breath. Maverick turned his head sharply toward her. Maverick actually lost control of his face for half a second. Tehran was the only one who looked unsurprised. You understand what you are agreeing to? Maverick asked, low enough for only her to hear. No, Brielle said, but I understand what happens if I refuse. His jaw tightened. She looked at him once, steady. They'll think I'm weak. Maverick will try to bury this inside council procedure, and the packs will leave divided and suspicious. Yes, I don't intend to give any of them that. Across the hall, Maverick stepped forward again. Tehran, reconsider. She turned her head toward him slowly. That was when she saw it. Not on his face, on the man behind him. One of the council officers had shifted his weight the wrong way, hand brushing once beneath his cloak. Not nervous, ready. Weapon. Brielle's senses, still too sharp since the awakening, caught it at once. So did Maverick. His body changed beside her. Too late. The officer drew a compact crossbow from beneath his cloak and fired. The bolt did not come toward Brielle. It came toward Tehran's Stonefang, and Brielle understood instantly. Not assassination, provocation. Kill an alpha inside her hall, and every pack in the room would tear itself apart before sunset. Exactly what the conspiracy needed. Tehran! She shouted, but Maverick was already moving, and the hall exploded into chaos. Chapter 12. The Council's Mastermind. Maverick moved first. The bolt meant for Tehran never reached him. Maverick caught the nearest banquet chair with one hand and hurled it across the hall. Wood smashed mid-flight into the council officer's arm. The shot veered, striking a stone pillar instead of a pack alpha's throat. Then the room broke. Guards surged forward. Wolves snarled. Several pack alphas half-shifted on instinct, claws flashing, eyes brightening, pack dominance rising like heat in a sealed room. "Stand down!" Brielle's voice cut through it. It should not have worked. Not on a room full of armed alphas and frightened wolves already on the edge of bloodshed, but her awakening had changed that. The command hit the hall like a shockwave, not enough to force submission from every pack alpha present, but enough to arrest the first violent second, enough to stop a massacre from beginning. Taryn turned, furious, and slammed the would-be shooter into the floor before the man could draw a second weapon. Frostmere's envoy pinned one of the other council officers against the wall. Captain Rourke barked orders, and Crescent guards finally regained control of the doors. Only Lord Maverick remained still. Too still. Brielle saw it immediately. He did not look like a man shocked by betrayal in his own ranks. He looked like a man watching a plan fail. Maverick saw it too. His gaze locked onto Maverick with a coldness Brielle had not seen before. "There," he said quietly. Maverick's expression tightened for the first time all day. Taryn dragged the injured shooter upright by the back of his collar. "Who sent you?" The officer said nothing. Blood ran down his wrist from splintered wood and an ugly break in the forearm. Taryn shook him once, hard enough to rattle his teeth. "Try again." Still nothing. Brielle stepped down from the platform. The hall watched her move, not as negotiator now, not as council strategist, as something else, as someone they were beginning to understand. She stopped in front of the officer. "You were not trying to kill me." His breathing changed. Tiny, fast. "Enough. You were trying to kill Stonefang, in my hall, in front of every pack leader in the north." Silence. Then Brielle turned slowly and looked at Maverick. "You wanted the packs at war before sunset." That landed. The room changed around those words. Wolves read pattern faster than politicians. Once the line appeared, the rest of it came into focus. Maverick stepped down beside her. "Not just war," he said. "Succession chaos." Brielle looked at him once. "Say it." Maverick's voice carried across the hall. "If Taryn dies here, Stonefang blames Crescent. Redclaw blames council weakness. Frostmere mobilizes to protect its own borders. Every pack is forced into position before anyone asks who profited." "And in that chaos," Taryn growled, "someone takes the center." All eyes returned to Maverick. He no longer looked smooth. He looked old, dangerously old, the kind of old that came from surviving too many plots to count. "You're all rushing to mythology," he said. "A foolish officer acts, and suddenly I am the architect of northern collapse." "No," Brielle said. "You became that when you moved to remove me from command the morning after someone used a council blade to kill me." Maverick's mouth hardened. Brielle kept going. "You tried to bury the investigation. You tried to stop the Alpha confirmation. And when that failed, someone under your authority fired on a pack leader to ignite inter-pack war." The injured officer laughed once. It was ugly. Not brave. Broken. Everyone heard it. Taryn's grip tightened. "What is funny?" The man spat blood onto the floor. "You still think he's the end of it." The hall went dead silent. Maverick turned first. "What did you say?" The officer looked at Brielle with strange, exhausted hatred. "You were never supposed to wake." That hit harder than the crossbow bolt. Brielle felt it in her bones, not because of the words themselves, because of how old they sounded, how rehearsed, how far back they must go. Maverick's head turned slowly toward Maverick. "Years earlier," he said. Brielle understood at the same moment. The steel roots, the assassin, the hidden bloodline, the council containment, none of this had begun when Maverick arrived.
None of this had begun with the war.
It had begun with her. Or, rather, with what she was. "Who hid my bloodline?" Brielle asked. The officer looked at her and smiled through blood. "Your mother." Every instinct in Brielle went cold. Maverick moved. Not to flee, to stop him. A knife flashed from his sleeve, but Maverick was faster. He crossed the distance in one brutal movement, caught Maverick's wrist and slammed him sideways into the council rail, hard enough to crack the polished wood. Guards rushed in. Taryn ripped the hidden blade away. The injured officer was still grinning. "Tell her," Maverick said to Maverick, voice like steel. "Now." For the first time, Maverick looked afraid. Not of Maverick, of the truth. Brielle stepped closer. "My mother hid my bloodline from whom?" Maverick stared at her for a second, then at the gathered alphas, then at the blood on the floor. Finally, he spoke. "From the Succession Council." No one breathed. Brielle's voice came out very still. "Explain." Maverick swallowed once. "Your mother belonged to House Saravale, the last female branch of an old ruling line. When she bonded into Crescent territory, the Succession Council demanded her first child be registered." Brielle felt the world narrowing around the edges. "My father refused?" "Yes." "Why?" Maverick looked away. Maverick tightened his hand on the older man's arm. "Answer." "Because registered heirs were disappearing." The hall erupted. Not in shouting this time, in stunned, horrified noise. Brielle heard none of it clearly, only the next sentence. "They were being removed," Maverick said, quietly, before they could challenge the succession structure the council preferred. Taryn's face turned murderous. "Preferred by whom?" Maverick shut his eyes once. "By the Regent Circle." Maverick went very still. That name meant something to him. Brielle saw it instantly. "You know it," she said. His gaze stayed on Maverick. "I know the old rumors." "Tell me." Maverick's voice was flat. "A hidden alliance of council houses and selected pack leaders. Not enough bloodline to rule openly, too much ambition to allow old lines to return." Brielle's stomach turned. "So the war was engineered," Maverick said. "Not just now, over years. Destabilize borders, thin old bloodlines, create dependence on council arbitration, then control succession through crisis." Taryn swore savagely. Marissa Redclaw's claws slid half out. "You bred chaos to control the alpha lines?" Maverick finally snapped. "We prevented collapse." Brielle turned on him. "No, you manufactured it." The injured officer laughed again, then coughed. "He doesn't even sit at the top of it." That was the twist, the true one. The room felt it immediately. Maverick wasn't the architect. He was only one hand of it. "Who?" asked Brielle. The officer looked directly at her. "Chancellor Morrigan, Regent Circle." Captain Rourke inhaled sharply. Even Maverick's expression surfeited. Brielle knew the name. Everyone did. Chancellor Morrigan sat above frontier disputes, succession records, and interpack treaty law. Publicly neutral, politically untouchable. Which meant the rot was older and deeper than even Maverick suspected. And then Brielle understood the final piece. My bloodline wasn't hidden to protect the council. Maverick looked at her. She looked back at Maverick. It was hidden to keep the Regent Circle from harvesting the succession. Maverick said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence confirmed it. Brielle straightened. Everything in her life rearranged itself in one brutal moment. Her mother had not hidden her wolf out of shame. Her father had not kept secrets out of cruelty. They had buried her birthright to keep her alive.
and the people who engineered the war had been waiting all these years for a chance to finish the job. Maverick released Varric only when 4 army guards had him. "What now?" Taryn demanded. Brielle's eyes were clear now, colder than before. Now she finally understood the board. "Now," she said, "we stop reacting." She looked around the hall at every alpha present. They wanted the succession controlled in secret. They wanted the old lines erased before they could unite the packs. Her gaze sharpened. "So, we drag it into the light." Taryn bared his teeth. "How?" Brielle answered without hesitation. "With a formal alpha challenge." And every wolf in the room understood exactly what that meant. The challenge circle was cut into the snow before dusk. No one argued against it now. Not after Varric's confession. Not after the name of the Regent Circle had entered the hall like poison. This was no longer about rumor, no longer about suspicion. The packs needed a lawful answer fast before panic fractured the North. In werewolf law, there was only one answer all packs respected. Challenge, witness, dominance, recognition. The challenge ground lay just beyond the inner fortress wall, inside a broad ring of standing stones half buried in winter frost. Torches burned between them. Wolves gathered in layered rows around the circle. Alphas, seconds, crescent guards, battle wolves, envoys who suddenly looked very small. Brielle stood at the edge of the ring in a dark winter coat, bare hands exposed to the cold. Maverick stood beside her. He had been silent for most of the last hour. Not distant, tense, controlled, the way powerful men became when instinct and judgment were fighting under the skin. Finally, Brielle looked at him. "You disapprove?" "Yes." "You think I shouldn't do this?" "I think you've never fully shifted." "That's true. And I think if your wolf breaks loose without control, every alpha in this ring will feel it." Brielle's voice stayed calm. "Good." His gaze cut to hers. That isn't a game." "No." "It could kill you. So could waiting for Chancellor Morgan to send a second wave." That shut him up for exactly 1 breath. Then he said, "You are infuriating." Brielle almost smiled. "So I've been told." Across the ring, Taryn Stonefang took his place as first witness. Maressa Redclaw stood as second witness.
3 more pack leaders moved into position around the outer stones, neutral, armed only by rank and law. Then the challenger entered. Not Taryn, not Maressa. A younger alpha from Ironvale, Riven, broad-shouldered, scarred across one cheek, with the look of a man who had never yet met a dominance contest he didn't think he could win. Brielle understood the politics immediately. He was not here because he hated her. He was here because someone had to test the claim, and younger alphas often volunteered where older ones calculated. Riven stepped into the snow ring and looked straight at Brielle. "This is lawful challenge," he said, "not blood feud. I test for truth of line and right of dominance." Brielle answered from the circle's edge. "Accepted." Maverick caught her wrist, only for a second, but the touch was hot, grounding, dangerous. "If you lose control," he said quietly, "I come in." "No." His jaw tightened. "Maverick." His eyes held hers, dark and furious, and something else beneath it, something deeper. "You are not dying in front of me," he said. That almost broke her focus. Almost. She pulled her wrist free slowly. "Then trust me." He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he stepped back. That was his choice, not to interfere. Not yet. Brielle crossed into the circle. The moment she did, the air changed. Every wolf present felt it. Her awakened bloodline answered the law of the ground. The old stones hummed with cold pack memory. Snow stirred around her boots. Riven shifted first. His bones cracked, shoulders widening, fur tearing through skin in a brutal, controlled transformation. Seconds later, a dark bronze wolf stood in the ring, massive and battle-trained. The gathered packs murmured approval. Brielle remained human for 3 breaths, 4. Then pain hit. Real pain, not like the awakening on the balcony, not like instinct opening its eyes. This was the body being asked to become what it had been denied for years. Her spine bowed, her breath tore out sharp, hands clenched into fists as heat exploded through her bones. The ring blurred, the sound of the crowd dulled to a pulse. Somewhere beyond it, Maverick took one involuntary step forward. Taryn blocked him with one arm. "No." Maverick's voice was lethal. "Move." "Not unless she falls." Brielle could not hear the words clearly, only the pressure, the tearing, the wolf inside her rising like a storm with nowhere left to go. Her vision sharpened until she could see every flake of snow floating through torchlight. She smelled fear, iron, fur, old stone, Maverick. Most of all, Maverick. That scent hit her like fire and steadied her in the middle of chaos. Then the shift took her. It was not graceful. It was violent and magnificent and overdue. Power tore through muscle and marrow. Her body dropped, lengthened, changed. The first true sound her wolf made was not a growl. It was a roar. Not loud in human terms, but in pack terms it shook the ground. When Brielle opened her eyes again, the world had changed. No, she had. She stood in the snow on 4 powerful limbs, fur dark as storm shadow, larger than she should have been for a first shift, larger even than some full-grown male alphas. The entire ring had gone silent. Riven's wolf froze, not from fear alone, from recognition. Brielle felt everything now in impossible clarity. The circle, the packs, the witnesses, the old authority in her blood. And she knew what to do. Riven lunged first, fast, skilled, direct for the throat. Brielle moved on instinct. She turned, absorbed the impact with her shoulder, twisted hard, and drove him sideways into the snow. The crowd erupted. Riven snapped back, circling, trying to regain momentum, but the moment had changed. He had expected raw power without control. Instead, he had found something worse: natural dominance. He attacked again. This time, Brielle let him come close enough to commit, then met him head-on with a force that stopped him mid-motion. Her snarl hit him before her body did. He stumbled. She pinned him, one paw across his shoulders, jaws at his neck. Dominance absolute. The old stones seemed to hum. Riven stopped fighting. Then, before every pack in the north, he lowered his head. Submission. The challenge was over. But Brielle's wolf was still rising, still expanding under the roar of instinct and the intoxicating flood of being finally whole. That was the danger. Maverick saw it at once. So did Taryn. "She's not back yet," Maressa muttered. Brielle heard them dimly, heard the warning, felt the edges of herself fraying. The wolf did not want to yield the world again, not after being buried alive for years. Snow spiraled around the ring. Wolves backed away. Several younger pack heirs dropped their eyes fully, overwhelmed by the pressure rolling off her. Maverick stepped into the circle. Taryn cursed. "Damn it!" But Maverick ignored him. He approached not like an alpha, like something far more dangerous to Brielle in that moment. Like home. He stopped just beyond striking distance, hands empty, posture open. Brielle. Her wolf snarled, not at him, at the threat of being pulled back.
His voice lowered. "Look at me." The scent of him hit her again. Winter, iron, black pine, dominance, and the strange, impossible pull of the bond that had started before either of them wanted it. Her wolf's ears twitched. Maverick took one more step. "You won." The words mattered. Pack law, recognition, safety. You do not need to keep proving it. Something in her eased, just a fraction. Maverick held her gaze, steady as stone. "Come back to me." The crowd heard it. So did Brielle. Not as command, but as trust, as choice. And that was what finally did it.
Her wolf let go. The shift back hit hard, but less violently. Bones reformed. Power folded inward. Brielle dropped to one knee in the snow, breath ragged, one hand braced against the ground. Maverick was there before anyone else. He caught her shoulders as the world tilted. The ring, the packs, the witnesses, all of them watched as Brielle lifted her head, and every alpha present understood the outcome. She had shifted. She had won. She had dominated a challenger on her first true transformation. The law had spoken, and there was no burying her now. Chapter 14. The Fall of the Conspiracy. They moved at midnight. Of course they did. Conspirators liked transitions, shift change, snowfall, exhausted guards, the hour when victory felt far away and bodies began to fail. But Brielle had spent her whole life inside negotiations built by men who assumed she would react slowly. She was done doing that. The first signal came from the lower archive tower. Fire. Not a full blaze yet, but enough smoke to drag half the fortress guard west if Captain Rourke hadn't already anticipated it. The second move came through the inner gate. Council soldiers wearing Crescent colors admitted under sealed authority orders Maverick had signed 2 days earlier. The third move came from inside the hall itself. 3 Regent Circle loyalists tried to open the eastern armory and seize the fortress wolves before the packs could organize. It might have worked before. Not now. Brielle stood in the war chamber over the central map table when bells sounded through the stone. Not as strategist anymore, as commander. Rourke takes the west archive and contains the fire. Terran locks the inner gate and strips rank from every councilman carrying Maverick's seal. Maressa to the eastern armory. No survivors if they resist. Maverick with me. No one argued. That was the first sign of how much had changed. Maverick matched her stride as they descended the inner stair. You already knew they'd come tonight. Yes. How? Because they lost the trial. Brielle drew the short battle blade from her belt. That made delay their enemy. The fortress had become a war in layers, smoke drifting along one corridor, steel striking stone in another, wolves shifting in the courtyard, pack battle calls echoing under the arches. By the time Brielle and Maverick reached the central hall, the coup was visible. Chancellor Morrigan's banner hung from the upper gallery, not hidden anymore. Silver thread on black. Regent Circle. There it was. The thing that had shaped the last decade of blood and silence. Morrigan herself stood at the top of the stairs in a pale winter coat untouched by ash, as calm as if she were presiding over treaty law instead of attempted regime seizure. She was younger than Brielle expected. That was the first unsettling thing. The second was the intelligence in her face. Not madness,
not theatrical villainy. Belief. The dangerous kind. You were supposed to stay buried. Brielle stopped at the foot of the stairs. Maverick stood one step behind and left, wolf-bright eyes fixed upward. You built all this for succession control. Morrigan's mouth barely curved. I built stability. Through assassinations, through management, through war, through necessity. Brielle had hated anyone more quickly than this. You erased heirs. I prevented pack fragmentation. Old bloodlines create chaos. They attract followers before they've earned command. Maverick's voice came like a blade drawn free. So you manufactured conflict and called it order. Morrigan ignored him. Her gaze stayed on Brielle. You could still be useful. Publicly recognized, properly guided, bound through council law before the packs rally around you. Brielle almost laughed. Even now, even after failure, Morrigan's still trying to negotiate ownership. You still think I'm something you can file? No, I think you are exactly what I was afraid of. And then she gave the order. Archers rose on both galleries. Council steel flashed from side doors. The last loyalists of the Regent Circle moved all at once. Maverick shifted before the first bolt was loosed. The black wolf that exploded into motion was pure war. He hit the left stair in a blur of fur and violence, tearing one archer over the rail before the man fully aimed. Brielle went right. She did not shift immediately. Not yet. She fought in human form first, because the hallway was crowded and the wolves behind her needed command more than spectacle. Down, she shouted. 2 Crescent guards ducked just before she threw a captured blade into the throat of the nearest crossbowman. Rourke's men poured into the hall behind them. Taryn entered from the west side, already bleeding, and grinning like a man finally enjoying himself.
"Gate is ours," he roared. "Then hold it," Brielle snapped back. Morrigan retreated up the stair. Not fleeing, repositioning, always calculating. Brielle saw the next move before anyone said it aloud. "She's going for the archive vault," she said. Maverick landed beside her in human form for one impossible second between shifts. The secession records. Yes! If Morrigan burned those, she could erase proof of old bloodlines, force every pack back into rumor and power struggle, and rebuild chaos from the ashes. Brielle shifted on the move. This time, it came cleaner, faster. Her wolf hit the stairs like a storm. Morrigan's bodyguards met her halfway. 3 of them, pack-trained, regent loyal, dead within seconds. 1 fell under Brielle's shoulder charge, 1 under Maverick's jaws, the 3rd under Muressa Redclaw, who came up the side stair and tore the man off the banister into open air. By the time Brielle reached the vault door, Morrigan had one hand on the iron wheel. "Do you know why your mother failed?" the Chancellor asked. Brielle's wolf paused. Morrigan smiled once, sharp, cold. "Because she thought hiding you would save you. That was her final mistake. She thought pain would destabilize Brielle. Instead, it focused her. Brielle hit her full force. Iron screamed, stone cracked. Morrigan went down hard against the vault door, the wheel wrenching sideways under impact. Human guards rushed in and then stopped, because Brielle stood over the fallen Chancellor in full alpha form, eyes blazing, fur dark with battle snow, dominance rolling through the corridor like thunder. Maverick arrived at her side. Below them, the fortress war was ending. Council steel clattered to stone. Wolves submitted. The regent circle was broken. Morgan tried one last time to rise with a knife in hand. Maverick would have killed her. Brielle stopped him with one look. No. That mattered. The wolves watching saw it. The packs heard it. Justice, not slaughter. Brielle shifted back and took the knife from Morgan's hand herself. Then she turned and faced the hall. "Witness," she said. Her voice carried through smoke and blood and old stone. Chancellor Morgan engineered border war, secession erasure, sanctioned assassination, and conspiracy against lawful Alpha lines. Pack by pack, one by one, the witnesses answered. Witnessed. The word rolled back like law. The conspiracy was over. Not hidden, not disputed. Over. And with it, Brielle Conti stepped fully into the authority they had spent her entire life trying to erase. Chapter 15. The Mate Bond. Dawn came quietly, too quietly for a fortress that had survived a coup. Snow fell in soft, slow sheets over the battlements. The smoke had thinned, the dead were counted, the wounded were wrapped and sleeping. The Regent Circle prisoners were sealed below under triple guard and pack witness. For the first time in days, the North was not erupting. It was waiting. The acknowledgement took place in the courtyard where everything had begun. Not with banners, not with spectacle, with witnesses. The alphas of Stonefang, Redclaw, Frostmere, Silver Hollow, Iron Vale, and Crescent stood in a broad half-circle under the pale winter sky. Behind them stood seconds, heirs, guards, wolves from every territory that mattered. Brielle stood in the center in a dark coat over battle leathers, hair unbound, posture steady. No disguise now, no containment, no hiding. Taryn spoke first. By witness of trial, battle, and lawful exposure of conspiracy, I acknowledge Brielle Conti of the hidden Saravale line as rightful Alpha blood. Maressa followed, then Frostmere, then Silver Hollow, then the rest, one by one. Not submission exactly, recognition, enough to change the North forever. When the last voice fell silent, Brielle felt the shape of the moment settle around her, not like a crown, but like responsibility finally arriving in its real form. She had imagined once that power would feel abstract, strategic, cold, useful. Instead, it felt alive, like standing in winter and knowing the storm answered your name. Then Maverick stepped forward. The courtyard changed again. Every wolf there felt it. The bond had been tightening since the balcony, since the awakening, since the challenge circle. Now, with war ended and no immediate bloodshed left to outrun it, there was nowhere for either of them to hide. Brielle held his gaze. "You look tense," she said. He gave a quiet breath that almost counted as laughter. "I am. That's unusual for you. I find this situation unusual." A few of the nearby alphas pretended not to listen and failed badly. Brielle's mouth moved faintly. Because of politics? No. The packs? No. She knew the answer already. Still, she asked, "Then what?" Maverick stopped in front of her. Near enough now that the scent of him wrapped around her instincts. Black pine, iron, snow, the deep, impossible pull her wolf had learned before her mind caught up. "The fact," he said, very quietly, "that I have spent days trying not to drag an active war behind me into a bond I cannot seem to stop wanting." The honesty of it hit harder than poetry would have. Brielle looked at him for a long second, then answered with equal honesty. "I spent days trying to decide whether the bond was real." And her wolf rose warm beneath her skin. No fear now. No panic. Just recognition. It is. The silence that followed was not empty. it was full of witness, of law, of instinct, of every pack waiting to see what kind of leader she would be now that the war had ended. Maverick's expression changed, softer somehow, and more dangerous because of it. "There is one thing left," Taryn said, from somewhere behind them. He sounded almost amused. Brielle did not look away from Maverick. "I know." Pack law mattered, not because she needed theater, because symbols stabilize power after chaos. The North had just watched false rulers fall. It needed to see what the new order looked like. Maverick knew it too. She saw the realization move through him. Then he did the thing no one present would ever forget. He knelt, not as defeated alpha, not as conquered male, not as political, as chosen equal, as mate. The courtyard inhaled as one body. Maverick lowered his head before Brielle Conti and spoke clearly enough for every witness to hear. "Not as conqueror, not as claimant. I kneel to Brielle of the old blood as the alpha I recognize, and as the mate I choose." The words went through her like fire, not because they elevated her, because they freed her. There it was. No coercion, no possession, no contract clause pretending feeling could be outmaneuvered. Choice. Her choice answered it. Brielle stepped closer and put one hand under his jaw, lifting his face until his eyes met hers. "In that case," she said quietly, "rise beside me." His breath caught once. Then he stood. No cheer followed, no roar, no theatrical collapse of the world into noise. Just something deeper. A settling. A shift through every watching wolf as the moment locked into memory and law. This was what came after conspiracy, after erasure, after war. Not another tyrant, not another hidden council. A leader who had been buried and returned. An alpha who chose witness over slaughter. A mate bond entered openly, without dominance games or stolen power. Snow drifted softly around them. Brielle turned and looked over the gathered packs. For the first time, she did not feel like the sharpest mind in someone else's structure. She felt exactly what she was. Whole. Her wolf, fully accepted now, moved beneath her skin with quiet certainty. Maverick stepped into place at her side, not in front, not behind, beside. And as the northern packs lowered their heads, not in fear but in acknowledgement, Brielle understood the final truth her enemies had never grasped. They had spent years trying to control succession, but succession was never the real threat. What terrified them was the possibility of a leader no longer willing to be hidden. The war ended there, not because violence disappeared, not because ambition died, but because the North had finally seen the truth in the open and chosen it anyway. And in the stillness after everything, under a white winter sky, Maverick's hand found Brielle's. This time, she did not pull away. Epilogue. One winter later. Winter returned to the Northern Territories almost exactly 1 year later. Snow drifted gently across the fortress walls of Crescent once again, settling along the battlements where wolves now walked in quiet peace instead of constant tension. The fortress had changed, not in its stone, but in its spirit. Where once there had been suspicion between packs, there were now banners from across the Northern Territories flying side by side: Stonefang, Redclaw, Frostmere, Silverhollow, and Crescent.
The war that had once threatened to divide them had become something else entirely. Unity. And at the center of it all stood Brielle. She had not become the kind of alpha the conspirators once feared. She did not rule through intimidation. She ruled the way she had always lived her life. Through clarity, through intelligence.
Through strength that did not need to be shouted to be understood. The packs followed her not because they had to, but because they trusted her. High above the courtyard, Brielle stood once more on the eastern balcony overlooking the valley, the same place where everything had begun. Snowflakes drifted through the cold air as she rested her arms against the railing. Behind her, the balcony door opened quietly. She didn't need to turn. She already knew who it was. "You're thinking too loudly again," Maverick said. His voice still carried that quiet calm that had once irritated her. Now it only made her smile. "Some things never change," she replied. Maverick stepped beside her. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the snow fall across the valley below. A year earlier, that valley had been on the edge of war. Now it was peaceful. Pack roads were open again, trade had returned, and the fortress had become a meeting place instead of a battlefield. Maverick rested his hands on the railing beside hers. "You did it," he said. Brielle glanced at him. "We did it." He smiled slightly at that. Their bond had grown stronger over the past year, not through politics, not through necessity, but through the quiet choices they continued to make every day, to stand beside one another, to lead together. Below them, a group of younger wolves raced across the courtyard in the snow, laughing as they chased each other between the stone pillars. Brielle watched them for a moment, then she exhaled softly. "This was the future my parents wanted," she said. Maverick followed her gaze. "They would be proud." Brielle nodded slowly. The past had been painful, but it had also led her here, to a place where she was no longer hiding, no longer surviving, but living fully in the life she had reclaimed. Maverick turned slightly towards her. "You know something?" "What?" "You're still terrifying." Brielle raised an eyebrow. "I'm supposed to take that as a compliment?" "It is." She laughed quietly. The sound carried lightly through the cold air. Then Maverick reached for her hand. This time, she did not hesitate. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like something that had always belonged there. Below them, the wolves continued laughing in the snow. Above them, the winter sky stretched clear and endless. And in that quiet moment, Brielle realized something simple but profound. The war had ended, the conspiracies had fallen, the hidden alpha had risen, but the greatest victory wasn't power. It was peace. And sometimes, peace looked like standing on a balcony in the snow with the one person who had chosen you when everything else was uncertain. And that is how the hidden alpha Brielle Conti changed the fate of the Northern Packs forever, not by conquering them, but by reminding them what leadership was meant to look like: strength, trust, and the courage to stand in the open without fear. If you enjoyed Brielle and Maverick's story, take a moment and tell me in the comments. Which moment surprised you the most? Was it when Brielle's wolf awakened, when the Alpha Challenge began, or when Maverick knelt before her in front of the entire Northern Pack? I always love reading which parts of the story stayed with you the most. And if stories like this are your kind of world, hidden alpha bloodlines, powerful wolves, and impossible mate bonds, then you're in the right place. Feel free to like the video so more people who enjoy these stories can discover it too. You can also share it with a friend who loves werewolf romance or supernatural stories. And if you'd like more stories like this one, just subscribe to the channel. There are many more worlds like this waiting to be told.